Silencio.
Nobody does dreams quite like David Lynch. Like most of Lynch's filmography, Mulholland Drive can appear, on first watch at least, kind of baffling and impenetrable. But after watching this gorgeous nightmare noir several times over, I think this particular puzzle I've managed to solve. Mulholland Drive appears to tell the story of a woman called Rita, played by Laura Harring, who wakes up on the titular Mulholland Drive with no memory of who she is and a bag of money. She meets a peppy young wannabe actress called Betty, played by Naomi Watts, and the two begin trying to solve the mystery of Rita's real identity and what she was doing on Mulholland Drive. The first 90 minutes or so of the film's running time explore this narrative, and everything seems fairly straightforward. But then things take a bit of a left turn in the final act. Suddenly, all of our characters have changed identities.
I don't believe you met my mother.
Storylines that we've become invested in seem to have been abandoned, and everything's just gone a bit batshit. That's because there are two narratives going on in Mulholland Drive. The one I've just described, the mystery about the woman with amnesia and a bag of money, takes place inside a dream. The other narrative going on in this film, the one that's predominantly told in the final act of the movie, is what, quote-unquote, really happened. This is the story of Diane Selwyn, also played by Naomi Watts, a failed actress who has her heart broken by her lover, Camilla Rhodes, also played by Laura Harring, who Diane then has murdered before killing herself. These two fractured narratives, these timelines, are interwoven, and it's up to us to unpick them. The majority of the story takes place in this dream world, in Diane's Hollywood-style fantasy.
I had a dream about this place.
And there are clues hidden throughout the film to suggest that what we're seeing isn't really happening.
It is an illusion.
This is a theme Lynch explores over and over again in his work, a happy, idyllic dream world that somehow seems too good to be true, one with darkness and death lurking just beneath the surface. Mulholland Drive is also a film that uses the trope of the unreliable narrator, something that's been used in art house and mainstream horror cinema for over 100 years. Everything we see here is from Diane's perspective, i.e. the perspective of a damaged woman going through some kind of psychotic break. This would perhaps explain why everything just seems a little bit off.
I mean, I just came here from Deep River, Ontario, and now I'm in this dream place.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
David Lynch has often cited The Wizard of Oz as one of his favourite films, and it's evident in so many of his movies. There are considerable links between Oz and Mulholland Drive, particularly in their structure. Much like Diane, Dorothy fantasises about a world more exciting and colourful than her own. She falls asleep and dreams that she's part of this epic adventure, only to wake up in the final act and discover that all of the co-stars in her dream were all of the people from her real life who she had simply recast.
And you, and you, and you, and you were there.
This is the key to unlocking Mulholland Drive. Like The Wizard of Oz, much of the action takes place in a dream, but it's bookended by sequences that happen in the real world. But David Lynch doesn't spell this out to us. It's up to us as the audience to piece together this fractured, baffling narrative. So, let's give it a go. I am going to dive in and tell this story how it really happens in chronological order. Confusingly, sometimes I'll refer to these two as Betty and Rita, and sometimes Camilla and Diane, depending on which narrative we're in. To help make it clearer, I'm going to frame all of the scenes that happen in the dream world in red curtains. Red curtains are a trope that Lynch uses over and over again in his work, and they usually represent some kind of dream world. They represent artifice. Then I'm going to frame everything that happens in the real world, i.e. not the dream world, in a blue box. David Lynch uses the colour blue, and particularly a blue box, throughout Mulholland Drive to hint at the dark nightmare lurking beneath this glossy, polished fantasy.
Silencio.
So, just to clarify, the nightmarish real world is framed in blue, the Hollywood fantasy is framed in red. In the dream world, these two are Betty and Rita. In the real world, they're Diane and Camilla. Confused yet? Me too. Oh well, let's get stuck in. The earliest point in the chronology of Mulholland Drive is actually the first thing we see in the film. Diane Selwyn, a sweet young ingenue from Deep River, Ontario, wins first place in a jitterbug contest, which encourages her to pursue a career in acting, to become a star.
I won this jitterbug contest. That sort of led to acting.
So Diane moves to Los Angeles to make all her dreams come true. There, she meets Camilla Rhodes, a beautiful and more established actress. Camilla helps Diane get some bit parts in some of her movies, and the two soon begin a love affair. But it seems pretty obvious from the start that Diane is much more into Camilla than Camilla is Diane.
We shouldn't do this anymore.
Don't say that.
On top of that, Diane becomes increasingly jealous of all the attention Camilla is getting from other women and men. Things definitely seem to be hotting up between Camilla and her director, Adam Kesher. Diane is overcome with bitterness, jealousy, and resentment.
Diane!
And this all comes to a head one night on Mulholland Drive, when Camilla brings Diane along to a party at Adam's house.
Welcome, Diane.
There, Camilla proceeds to ignore Diane for the rest of the evening. She flirts with people in front of her, and then, as the icing on the cake, Adam announces to everyone that he and Camilla are engaged. A heartbroken Diane finally snaps. If she can't have Camilla, then no one else will. She arranges to meet a hitman in Winky's diner and pays him to murder the woman she loves. The hitman agrees and tells her when the deed is done, she'll find a blue key. That night, a troubled Diane goes home, takes a load of hallucinatory drugs, and passes out. This is one of the first images we see in the film, and it's one of the most important. It's a clue that what we're about to see for the next 90 minutes is a drug-induced dream. At this point, the story shifts into Diane's dream world. It's a Hollywood-style fantasy, and Diane has recast herself and all of the people in her life in this exciting mystery noir thriller.
Come on, it'll be just like in the movies. We'll pretend to be someone else.
In this reality, Diane is called Betty, and she's our heroine. She's a promising, bright young actress with tons of confidence and charisma. She's staying in her aunt's glamorous Hollywood pad. She's going to auditions and wowing the casting directors, and seems to be destined for success. On the flip side, Camilla, or Rita in this narrative, is a traumatized woman with no identity. She has amnesia. She is literally a blank slate. Betty takes Rita under her wing in the way that Camilla did with Diane. Rita is completely dependent on Betty. Betty is able to go off to auditions and chase her career, while Rita has to wait patiently for her at home.
I hope I'm back in a couple of hours. Don't drink all the Coke.
Good luck.
This is Diane's dream scenario, in which she has Camilla to herself. Meanwhile, elsewhere in this Hollywood-style fantasy, we are introduced to an assortment of other characters. The hitman, the mob boss, the cowboy, and of course, the director. These are all people that Diane has crossed paths with over the last couple of days leading up to her dream, and she's recast them all as her supporting players.
Just call me Coco. Everybody else does.
In Diane's fantasy, Adam, the man who stole her lover and ruined her life, is having his life ruined. He's being threatened by gangsters, his marriage is falling apart, he loses all of his money, and he ends up alone in a grubby hotel. Meanwhile, in this narrative, the hitman that Diane paid to kill Camilla is terrible at his job. He's a klutz, and he keeps accidentally murdering the wrong people. Then there's the woman who was flirting with and kissing Camilla at the party. In this reality, she's just another out-of-work actress that nobody wants to cast.
There's no way! There's no way!
And is only getting parts because criminals are making it happen.
When you see the girl that was shown to you earlier today, you will say, "This is the girl."
This is the girl.
However, this dream world that Betty has created for herself becomes increasingly unstable. Throughout this narrative, there are strange, inexplicable moments. Clues that not all is as it seems.
Who are you?
My name's Betty.
No, it's not. Someone is in trouble. Something bad is happening.
And the dream really starts to crumble when Betty and Rita venture into the real Diane's flat and discover a dead body. Suddenly, two worlds begin to merge and identities become confused.
You look like someone else.
That night, Betty and Rita drive to Club Silencio. This is a strange and beautiful scene in which Diane and Rita watch a series of seemingly live musical performances that all turn out to be fake, to be recordings.
It's all recorded.
It's a weird scene and everyone has a different interpretation of what's really happening here. But in my opinion, Club Silencio represents a kind of place between two worlds. In the structure of the film, this scene works as a segue between the dream and the reality. Lynch has used similar spaces elsewhere in his work. Look at the place behind the radiator in Eraserhead. Or of course, the Red Room in Twin Peaks. These theatrical spaces seem to exist in their own world, on a different plane of consciousness. In Mulholland Drive, Club Silencio represents that strange state of consciousness when you're asleep, but you're just about to wake up. That's when dreams are at their most unstable. The scene slowly shifts and becomes tinged with sadness as the dream is ending and reality is looming. It's at this moment that Betty and Rita discover the blue box. When they open the box, the nightmares of the real world come spilling out. And Diane Selwyn wakes up to find herself back in her miserable reality. Later that day, she finds the blue key on her coffee table and knows that Camilla is dead. Diane reaches breaking point. She begins hallucinating. She desperately tries to immerse herself back in the fantasy world she created, but she can't. The reality of her situation is creeping in. She is attacked by two figures, people we can assume are her relatives from her small town life in Ontario, the life she's tried desperately to escape. She is aggressively confronted with the cold, stark reality that her Hollywood dream is over. She'll never be a star, and the woman she loves is dead. Diane shoots herself in the head, and the last images we see are flashes of her Hollywood dream. Then the dream is over, and only silence remains.
Silencio.
So there we go, that is my interpretation of what happened in Mulholland Drive. It might at first appear to be a classic mystery, a crime thriller, an LA noir, but really, this film isn't any of those things. Mulholland Drive is the tragic story of a woman with hopes and dreams who has them crushed and loses everything. It's a film about Hollywood, and perhaps more importantly, about the Hollywood lie.
That is, I guess you'd say, sort of why I came here.
But, of course, I could be completely wrong about all of this. What do you think Mulholland Drive is really about? What's your theory? Comment below with your thoughts. Looking for more horror content? Subscribe now for more videos like this one and listen to the Evolution of Horror podcast. Head on over to evolutionofhorror.com.